So we are going to desaturate color by mixing complementary pairs. You can refer to your color wheel, starting with the primaries. If you move the black arrow to a primary, say red, across the wheel will be its complementary color, green. Blue, the complementary color is orange. And with yellow, the complementary color is violet. Okay, so in your gouache set, you have a double primary palette, meaning you have a warm and a cool of each. So permanent red is warm, permanent scarlet, cool, permanent yellow, deep, warm, permanent lemon, cool, permanent green, middle, warm, permanent green, light is cool, cobalt blue is warm, and sky blue is cool. So if we pull out the primary colors, I will pull out the warm primaries. So we have permanent red, we have permanent yellow deep, and we have cobalt blue. So their complementary pairs would be yellow and violet, permanent red, and permanent green middle. And for blue, as you know, orange is a mixture of yellow and red, which you would need to mix in order to experiment with blue. So we'll leave blue for now. You can work with yellow and violet if you like. I am going to work with permanent red and permanent green middle. I've got my palette here with a little section for each. So I have green and red. I also have a glass of water and a brush for each color. So that is going to keep things separate and consistent. This is our special guest. This is Windy. She's a baby kitten. Oops. And she's going to be off screen. Okay, so first we'll start with red, and we will mix just a little bit of water into it to get the right consistency. Try and remove extra water from your brush and work to get just enough red on that brush to make a swatch. I need more color, less water. Okay, so we are going to start with the prismatic color, meaning the closest thing to pure color that we can get with pigments. So prismatic red is just pure red with nothing else mixed into it. Okay, I'm going to go to my green brush. Make sure there's not too much water. I'm going to get a little green. Try and get the same consistency or amount of paint per water as I had with the red. I'm going to add a little bit. I'm going to add just a little bit into my red here. And then I'm going to go back to the red brush because I'm working with mostly red. I'm going to clean it off. I keep cleaning my brush so that I know what is on it. Like if you have color in your bristles of your brush and you're trying to mix, it'll throw you off. So I'm just trying to pick up red with just the tiniest bit of green in it. It's much less saturated because it's too watery. But what I've done here, adding a little more green in. What I've done here is I've just muted the red. So the red is looking much more like a sort of mauve version of itself. And you can see here, I have my prismatic red, and then I have a muted red that I've achieved by adding green into it. Okay, so now I'm just going to pick up more green and add that into the red. So I'm just tapping in the green pigment on the side. I go back to my red brush, make sure the brush isn't too wet. And I just want a balance. I still want it to be majority red, but it needs to have more green than the muted swatch did. So we're going for a chromatic gray. And just a little swatch of it. Okay, so here's my chromatic gray. It is more muted than the last swatch. I have prismatic, muted, chromatic gray. And now I'm gonna go for an achromatic gray, meaning achromatic means no color, which of course is really, really hard to achieve. And technically the way you would achieve that is a 50-50 mix of the two complementaries, okay? So that's a little bit hard to do with paint, but what you could do is if you have a palette, start a new section and try and bring in exactly the same amounts of red and green on your two brushes and mix them there. However, what I've been doing is adding the green into the red incrementally. So I'm gonna continue to do that and just try and put as much green as I can in here until it's looking as desaturated as I can get it and as achromatic as I can get it. And it's very hard to do this perfectly, but what you are all trying to do is create chromatic and achromatic grays that you like, that you can use in compositions. So get them as gray as you can. So you should be able to see here that I've been able to achieve a gray. So I'm not sure what it looks like on camera, but here it is basically just a warm gray. So I can tell there's red in it, but it is not red, it is not green, it is an achromatic gray made of red and green. So it would be really challenging to try and go back in the opposite direction to try and initially mix a chromatic gray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean my green brush, and I don't have any red in my green, so I'm going to start with a prismatic swatch. I'm going to just start with pure green, try and get the right consistency, amount of water, and I'll start it out here so I can work my way in. So that's a prismatic green. And as you know, the next step is a muted green. So I have a fresh section of red over here because I don't want a red with any green in it to start. And so I'm going to do the opposite of what I just did. I was just mixing green into red, and now as I mute the green, I'm going to mix red into green. So I'm going to take a little bit of red on my brush, add it in on the side, so a little bit of pigment. I'm going to clean my green brush so that there's no paint on it. I'm going to remove a lot of the water. I'm going to go back in. I think I need more red. Take my red brush, put a little more on, and pick up that red and that green, and here is a muted green. So the muted green is just looking more dull. It's looking a little bit more gray, softer, not as bright. So that's a muted green. And the next step would be a chromatic gray that's majority green. So I'm going to go just get my red brush, get some more red and add it to the green, just incrementally adding. Okay, so hopefully that's enough and not too much. I'll put a swatch in here. So it's much darker, it's much more dull. That is a chromatic gray that is pretty green. So I'm just gonna see here if I'm able to achieve on the other side, coming down an achromatic gray like I did coming from the other direction, and see if I can get them to, if I can get the same color in the middle. I don't think I'm gonna be able to, it's really challenging. But it's good for you guys to see the mixing process and the difference. So I think it's actually pretty close. However, there's just like much more paint on my brush. So you can see here is the new chromatic gray, which I think is a similar, you know, color, but it's much more, there's much more paint on the brush. So we have our prismatic colors. We have red and green. We have muted colors, a muted green and muted red. We have chromatic grays, a green hued chromatic gray and a red hued chromatic gray. And then we have our achromatic grays. So we have desaturated colors by mixing in their complementary pair. And what you can do is start with the primaries as we looked on the color wheel, so yellow and violet, red and green, blue and orange. And as you mix orange, you know, you can experiment with that one. And then of course you can just move this around, and a primary pair, yellow-green, can be mixed into red-violet. So you will need to mix a red-violet and mix a yellow-green, and then mix those together and see if you can desaturate those two. So the further you go, the better you will get at mixing. So you're mixing a red-orange, and then a blue-green, so you can desaturate the two. That's another complementary pair. So you can start messing around until you have a palette of 6 chromatic grays and 6 achromatic grays that you like to start your composition with. So Wendy is asleep, but I'll just pull her up here to say goodbye. Say goodbye, Wendy. All right.